President Trump has said he is planning to meet Russia's Vladimir Putin, probably in Saudi Arabia. It comes after the two men had a 90-minute phone call, reversing years of US isolation of the Russian leader. Mr. Trump described it as a highly productive conversation and said teams from the US and Russia would start negotiations immediately about ending the war in Ukraine. Donald Trump subsequently spoke on the phone to President Zelensky. At a press briefing in the last little while, President Trump denied freezing Ukraine out of this process. Well, this map shows the extent of Russian progress in the war, here in red, territory regained or held by Ukraine in purple. We are just days from the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. We'll have reaction to President Trump's comments tonight shortly. We'll hear from our correspondents in Moscow and in Kyiv. But our first report tonight is from our North America editor, Sarah Smith.
Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, not friends exactly, certainly not allies, but able to work together, like at the summit in Helsinki in 2018. Mr. Trump seems to have a wary admiration for the Russian strongman, and he says they enjoyed a long, productive phone call today, even promising to visit each other's countries. On social media, he posted, "We both agreed we want to stop the millions of deaths taking place in the war with Russia-Ukraine. There have actually been over 100,000 deaths, not millions." And he went on, "President Putin even used my very strong campaign motto of common sense. We both believe very strongly in it." That just raises so many questions. What does President Trump think a peace deal could actually look like?
These negotiations are ongoing. I will allow the president to divulge any red lines that he may set. But I think as deals in the past have come to fruition, the president has proven one of the things that makes him a very effective negotiator is not revealing what he's anticipating from both sides. But he is at the forefront of these negotiations, in addition to the very qualified individuals who he's tasked with speaking to both President Putin and President Zelensky.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was on the phone for an hour with Donald Trump. He said it was a meaningful conversation about the opportunities to achieve peace. President Trump won the election in places like Erie, Pennsylvania, in part because he promised to end the war in Ukraine and the money America spends aiding Ukraine's defense.
We weren't in that war, and I hate to be selfish because I know everybody deserves help, but we technically are putting ourselves at risk helping them because it wasn't our fight to begin with.
It's really hard to decide what we should do for Ukraine when there's so much hurt here and there's so much funding that our people need. So although we've always been the country bailing everybody out, I think at a certain point we need to kind of take a step back and see are our people hurting?
The return last night of Mark Fogel, an American teacher just released from a Russian prison and welcomed to the White House, helped set the positive mood between the two nations.
I want you to know that I am not a hero in this at all. And President Trump is a hero.
It is all part of a carefully choreographed diplomatic dance, a rapprochement between Russia and America that must be deeply worrying to Ukraine.
Well, we'll have more from Sarah in a while, but earlier today, the US Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, delivered an uncompromising message to Ukraine. He said the US didn't support Ukraine joining NATO and that a return to the country's 2014 borders was unrealistic. James Waterhouse sent this report from the capital, Kyiv.
The heightening talk of peace has changed little in Kyiv. An all too familiar tragedy at dawn, after Russian missiles once more targeted Ukraine's capital, killing one and injuring four more. But the blows for Ukraine kept coming. At this conference centre in Brussels, America's new defence secretary laid out a blunt message from the White House.
We want, like you, a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. But we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective.
That means Ukraine is going to lose land to Russia.
The United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. Instead, any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops. To be clear, as part of any security guarantee, there will not be U.S. troops deployed to Ukraine.
Ukraine is also grappling with a battlefield reality of minimal progress. It is the invaders who have been dominant. Tonight, President Zelensky had his own call with Donald Trump.
We discussed many issues, and President Trump informed me of what Putin told him. We believe that America's strength is enough, together with us, to pressure Russia and Putin towards peace.
And that road to peace is neither going to be straight nor smooth for Ukraine. James Waterhouse, BBC News. In 2022, when Ukraine put up the fight it did, many Ukrainians dared to believe that they could win this war. And no one, I think, believed that Donald Trump was really going to come into office and say to Ukraine, I'll give you everything you need to finish the task. It has been a bruising start to the long road to any kind of peace negotiation, but many here will feel there is plenty to play for. There is no detail yet on the level of American military support down the line. The White House is talking about sustaining a ceasefire. We may well see air defences continue to be delivered to the country. And those are the crumbs. Those are the foundations for Ukraine to some kind of future, which will be alongside Russia.
James, thank you. James Waterhouse there. Well, in a moment, we'll get the latest, as I say, from Sarah Smith in Washington. First, though, let's head to Moscow tonight and our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg. So what will Vladimir Putin be making of all this tonight, Steve?
Well, a single telephone call will not end the war in Ukraine. But this telephone call, I think Vladimir Putin will see very much as a diplomatic victory already. I mean, just think about it. 3 years ago, President Putin launched his full-scale invasion of Ukraine and put himself in the political wilderness. He was a pariah. You had thousands of international sanctions being imposed on Russia. You had the International Criminal Court issuing an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin. You had Joe Biden calling Putin a murderous dictator. Fast forward to today, and you have a new American president who's more than happy to have a 90-minute telephone conversation with Vladimir Putin, who talks about wanting to work closely with Putin to end the war in Ukraine. And I think very much Vladimir Putin has got what he wanted. He's got the opportunity to negotiate on Ukraine directly with the United States. But the last thought, does Vladimir Putin actually want to negotiate? Is he serious about negotiations? Is he ready to make compromises? And I'll leave you with this thought from a very ultra pro-Kremlin newspaper this week, which had this assessment, which I think is quite honest. It said this: Russia is ready for talks, but on its terms. Essentially, the paper says, that is called an ultimatum.
Steve, thank you. And let's head to Sarah in Washington. President Trump, Sarah, talking about talks immediately. What happens now?
Yes, President Trump said he's optimistic that they might be able to organise a ceasefire sometime soon so that the fighting is paused at least whilst talks go on. And in the last few minutes, we have heard from him in the Oval Office in the White House. He was talking to reporters about the conversations that he'd had with Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky today. Listen to this.
We had a great call, and it lasted for a long time, over an hour this morning. I also had with President Zelensky a very good call after that. And I think we're on the way to getting peace. I think President Putin wants peace, and President Zelensky wants peace, and I want peace. I just want to see people stop getting killed.
So we heard a little bit more detail from Donald Trump as he was questioned by reporters there. He says he thinks the first time that he'll actually meet Vladimir Putin is likely to be in Saudi Arabia, so he's obviously planning a trip there. He didn't say anything about any plans to meet with President Zelensky. And he was asked, is he freezing Ukraine out of this process? He said, no, he wasn't. But then when he was asked if he sees Ukraine as an equal partner in these talks, he most certainly didn't say yes. And he backed up what his defence secretary was saying about it being impossible for Ukraine to keep all of the territory that it wants, to go back to those pre-2014 borders, and that he thought it was completely impractical for Ukraine to become a member of NATO. So he's very, very eager to get on with negotiations, very eager to make peace, but it's not at all clear on what terms.